Hello once again, it's Matthew here from MatthewNorthMusic. Thanks for watching my latest video. And as ever, if you find the kind of videos that I make interesting, being them about music, electronics, something in between, then please hit the subscribe button. It really does help. And if you hit the little bell icon as well, you'll be notified every time there's a new video. Now, today's a video of kind of three parts really, or maybe two parts, but I'm going to bring the two subjects together. And the first thing is, I was in London the other day and I had to pop into Primark. Now, I won't bore you with the full details of why I was in there, but suffice to say, I had a leaking shoe, and so I required to acquire myself of some extra pairs of socks and a pair of shoes that don't have holes in them because it was a very wet day. But while I was in there, I got caught on a sign, and this sign said pre-loved t-shirts. And I thought, what's this all about? So I had a look, and on the surface, they appear to be selling old band t-shirts, used band t-shirts. And I had a look at some of the t-shirts that were there, and you know, there was one by a band called Bad Boys from Boston. I have no idea who they are, but I assume they are some sort of American band. And then there were other t-shirts by more familiar artists like Ariana Grande and the obligatory Nirvana t-shirt. Now, Primark have been selling t-shirts and band t-shirts for a number of years. You know, they've mostly the sort of ones that skirt around copyright, things like the Ramones t-shirts and Rolling Stones t-shirts and band t-shirts with just like the band name on or a slogan. And when I say getting around copyright, what I mean is it's not against copyright laws for you to draw something. If I was to draw a picture of Paul McCartney with a pen, I mean, I can't draw, and I certainly couldn't draw a picture of Paul McCartney, but if I did, I could then put that on a t-shirt and sell it, because the image is not copyrighted to anybody. It's my own drawing. And this is, I don't know if this is an English law, an American law, or both, but it's some kind of law based on, I can't remember the exact terminology, but it's a get-out clause, and it's been used for years. This is why you see, sometimes you'll see a documentary that somebody's made, like when you used to get these music documentaries on VHS tapes in the 90s and early 2000s about, you know, classic albums and things, you know, classic music reviews, I think the label was called. And I remember they did a video about the Beatles' Revolver, and it included, you know, Klaus Vullman talking about his artwork, but the actual artwork you saw was not the album cover. It was somebody had done a drawing of it to illustrate kind of what it looked like. And so it's this kind of sort of get out thing. And this is why you see things like Ramones t-shirts, Beatles t-shirts, Stones t-shirts, Nirvana t-shirts, because you can copy the design and it might well be slightly different, but not 100% different, but it's close enough that people will then buy it thinking they've just bought a Nirvana t-shirt. And anyway, I saw these t-shirts, and the first thing I thought was, they don't look secondhand to me. They might be old stock, and, you know, and they might be seconds or whatever, but certainly things like the Ariana Grande and the Bad Boy from Boston t-shirts do not look like they've been worn by people. And secondly, they had multiple copies of these t-shirts. Now, if it was genuine secondhand clothing, then you'd have a rack of, you know, maybe, I don't know, 100 t-shirts, and they'd all be different. Whereas here they kind of had a rack of about 100 t-shirts, of which there were about, you know, 15 or 20 designs. And it's got me thinking, are Primark doing this because they want to start buying up people's t-shirt collections and selling them? Because there's a massive market in old t-shirts. Old t-shirts are worth more now in some instances than records. I mean, I sold off a lot of my t-shirts because I had a massive collection, and I eBayed them all about 10 years ago, and I was getting between, you know, 10 and 30, 40 pounds per shirt. And some of the more tatty t-shirts actually fetched more than the same t-shirt but immaculate, because I very often used to do, as a lot of my friends did, we always bought two of the same t-shirt, one to wear, one to keep. And now some of those t-shirts, and most of them were Sisters of Mercy t-shirts, those t-shirts now are fetching 3 figures. So there is lucrative money to be made out of old t-shirts. But where I don't understand what Primark are doing is they've got loads of these t-shirts of bands nobody's heard of, like the Bad Boys from Boston. And are people just buying it because they like the design of the t-shirt rather than knowing who the band is? Because that's obviously been a business model that Primark have had for a long time with the amount of Ramones t-shirts, Nirvana t-shirts, etc. that they've been selling. But could it also be that they might have a subsidiary that are actually going to buy up old t-shirts and then sell them at huge prices? I don't know, but these t-shirts to me do not look like they are genuine second-hand t-shirts. They look like some of them are reproductions that might well have been bought in, but because if they've been bought in by a third party from somewhere and they're just being sold as second-hand, then maybe that is another kind of, you know, way to get around the sort of copyright thing. I don't know. I'm not an expert on this, but if you do know more about this than I do, please leave a comment in the video, because it's always good to know the exact legalities of these things. Anyhow, so I'm just putting that out there. I just thought it was a really odd thing that the biggest clothing chain in the UK, whose bread and butter is, cheap jeans, cheap t-shirts, cheap puffer jackets, and most of the clothes I wear, have gone down this route of memorabilia and t-shirts. And, are they going to start selling more pop memorabilia? My feeling is they probably will. Now, that links to another clothing company called Urban Warehouse. Now, Urban Warehouse were one of the first chains that brought back vinyl. They were selling the cheapo Crosley type record players, and they were selling records. But the thing was, when they started selling records in the sort of late 2000s, they weren't that expensive compared to what records are now. They had all the sort of the typical kind of cool records, things like Joy Division albums, for example. And they were retailing in there for about 17, 18 quid. And then around the same time, Sainsbury's supermarkets started selling records, but they were trying to sell them cheaper. And you could, at one point, go into Sainsbury's and buy a Beatles record or a Stone Roses album or a Rolling Stones album for between £10 and £15. There wasn't many more expensive. It was that kind of low price. But the thing was, the vinyl thing really started to pick up at that point, and the shops well, certainly Sainsbury's, stopped doing vinyl because they could not buy it in at a price that they could keep it at that price. And we now see, as I've made points before on my Facebook page and on videos, that some vinyl records now are just prohibitively expensive, particularly in HMV, whereas I've mentioned before, things like back catalogue David Bowie albums are around about £45 a piece. And so I was in Exeter the other day and I saw that WH Smith's in Exeter are now selling records again. And of course, we all have a deep nostalgia for buying records in WH Smith's, because anybody over the age of about 40 would have bought records, CDs and tapes in WH Smith's at some point in their life. And I certainly bought a lot of records in WH Smith. In fact, there's a single here out my collection that's going to be in my next video. It's the Art of Noise Close to the Edit, and you can probably see in the corner it's got a WH Smith's price ticket of £1.45, which was their standard price for a single in 1984 when I bought this and many other records. And so in a way, I think it's nice that WH Smith's are selling records again, because they were a record retailer. But my big thing is, why did they stop doing it? Because when all the other record shops on the high street disappeared, we had Our Price disappeared, we had Virgin disappear, and you know, they could have held the market. And certainly in the last 10 years, where record sales obviously have done very well, there were lots of WH Smiths in towns where there weren't any other record shops. I mean, near where I grew up in Newton Abbot, that WH Smiths has been there my whole life. And had they still stocked records and CDs, they probably would still be selling records and CDs, because they did have a very good record and CD department in the back of the shop. And if you go into that shop now, there's so much empty floor space because they just don't stock as much stuff as they used to. So will WH Smiths help the record market? Well, probably not. And that's because they're still very expensive. Records now are more expensive than any time ever. I mean, you are kind of looking at £30 for a new album, and that's beyond most normal people's pockets. I mean, the new Cure album came out this week, but I bought the CD because I saw absolutely no point in spending £30 on something when I can have a 3-disc version for £20, including a nice Dolby Atmos mix and high-res audio on a Blu-ray, and have the album and the instrumental version. So I bought the CD. And I probably won't ever buy much in the way of new vinyl anymore because it's just so expensive, and I don't see any major reason to, apart from independent artists. That's a different thing. If an independent artist who's putting out their own stuff are making records, then yeah, I'll buy a record off them because the money goes directly to them, and especially if it's at a gig, because you can get it signed and whatnot. But the sort of other part of this is Waterstones Bookshop. They are now selling records. Now, I'm really surprised they didn't get into the record market sooner, because I thought it would kind of be a natural progression, because bearing in mind Waterstones is the place you'd go to if you wanted to buy a book about music. You know, if you wanted to buy the latest David Hepworth book, or, you know, a Mark Lewis and Beatles book, you go to Waterstones, they will have it on the racks. And so I had a look at the record department today in the branch near me, and they had all the usual things that you would expect, you know, Pink Floyd albums, Fleetwood Mac's Rumours and Tusk. And it's very much like the greatest albums of all time is basically kind of what they stock. And I decided to look at some of the prices, and the prices varied enormously. There were some jazz albums in there, which I think possibly are kind of budget label versions of stuff. They might have even been old stock of D'Agostini albums, because D'Agostini did a classic jazz series for a while, of which they were not very well pressed. The first one they did was Miles Davis's Kind of Blue, and that was terrible. But they, you know, they're about sort of £15–16. Then I spotted a copy of Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, and that was £20. And I thought, well, that's not too bad. And then I looked at the Beatles, and this is the real crux of the matter. I looked at 4 Beatles albums, and they were all at different prices. Now, one of them I can understand, and that was Magical Mystery Tour, because obviously that's got the booklet inside, so that would be a more expensive product to manufacture. But that came in at a whopping £42.99. Now, for 40 quid, you can pick up, you know, a decent, you know, original American copy, or you could probably buy one of the nice sort of, you know, European or EMI copies from the late 70s for that sort of money or less. But yeah, £42.99. But the 3 that really got me, they were in the row together. There was a copy of Please Please Me, a copy of Revolver, and a copy of A Hard Day's Night. Now, these were all the standard stereo issues. They will have cost exactly the same to manufacture. They probably were bought from the wholesaler at the same price, or they should have been, because they are just they're just different Beatles albums. None of them are double albums. None of them have got posters. There's nothing special about any of them, other than the fact they are 3 early Beatles albums. But the Please Please Me was $24.99, which I kind of think is the top end of what you should be paying for a new vinyl album. I don't hold with 30 quid. I think 25 should be about tops, and I think 35 for a double album, but not anything more. But then Hard Day's Night was £31.99, which, you know, is a fair hike of a price. You know, another 7 quid. For what reason? I can't see a reason. But then the one that really got me was Revolver, which was £35.99. So that's £11 difference on something that should be the same price. If you go to a normal record shop and you look at all the back catalogue Beatles CDs, they're all going to be the same price. They're all probably going to be $9 or $10.99. You know, there's going to be no real variation in the price. So why are the records at such a different price? I don't understand that at all. And the last album I looked at was another perennial favourite of the vinyl revival. And in fact, I think along with AM by the Arctic Monkeys, I think the first Royal Blood album very much was the instigators of younger people getting into buying records. And lots of young people bought the first Royal Blood album. But it was still, you know, £1 and a penny shy of 30 quid. Now, I remember one of my work colleagues buying that on vinyl when it first came out, and I know he paid less than 15. I think he paid like $13.99 for it. It might have been $14.99, but it was certainly, you know, around about that. Same as I remember paying like 15 or 16 pounds for the Arctic Monkeys AM album. And so, yeah, this is it. The prices are just crazy. And I've read a few news articles, many of you have probably seen the same news articles, that record sales this year are now 33% down on last year. And I think there's good reason for this. Number one, obviously, is the price. Number two, a lot of vinyl sales are based on specific products, things like the box sets that come out. If there's a Beatles box set that comes out, that's going to mean a lot more records are going to be sold. The stats have come out for the first week of the new Cure album. Now, the new Cure album came out on multiple vinyl formats. There was like a white vinyl, there was a black vinyl, the different shop. I think Amazon had their own coloured vinyl. I think there's probably like 5 or 6 different versions of that album. And in the UK, it sold something in the order of about up to about, I think, just under 24,000 copies. And I think the CD did about 20,000 copies. Now, there was only 2 versions of the CD, the 3-disc version and the 1-disc version. And with the various versions of the vinyl LP, I would suggest the vast majority of people that bought it on vinyl or any of those limited edition versions probably bought more than 1 copy. And so, you know, they might well have sold you know, 24,000 in the first week, but probably to about 6,000 or 7,000 people who bought multiple copies. Now, that obviously will help add to the stats of sales of new records and whatnot, but it's an isolated case. And it's not the case that people are buying more records. And it is just because they are too expensive. If record companies and the manufacturers, because there's more presses around now, it's easier to get records made. If they put their prices down, they will make records not be a collector's item, but they will become something that you can listen to. And that's what it should be. It should be something to listen to. Anyway, hopefully you found some of this interesting, and I do hope you'll be good enough to leave some comments in this video, because I think it's a good, interesting topic to talk about. And I'll catch you on the next one.